It didn't begin with shouting. That's how I recognized it. He went quiet instead. His jaw tightened, his shoulders stiffened, and there was that familiar pause, the one I'd learned to notice long before I learned how to leave. That pause was always my warning. The moment I knew something had already been decided, I took a step back. Too late. The impact came suddenly, sharp enough to knock the room off balance. My head snapped to the side, and I tasted something metallic before I fully understood what had happened. I steadied myself against the counter, forcing myself to breathe. I didn't scream. I hadn't screamed in a long time. Noise never helped. Silence did. Silence made him feel finished. So I stayed quiet, even as the pressure in my chest grew heavier, even as my body struggled to keep up. There was a brief pause. For a split second, I thought it might be over. I looked up. He was watching me. That was when it happened again, not rushed, not angry, just deliberate. I lost my balance and slid down against the cabinet as a deep, burning pain spread through my side. My breathing turned shallow and uneven, like my lungs couldn't do what they were supposed to anymore. He stood there, waiting. When I didn't cry or apologize, something in him relaxed, like control had been restored. He turned away without a word, poured himself a drink, and went to bed. Within minutes, his breathing was slow and steady, completely untroubled. I stayed on the floor long after. Every breath hurt. Not on the surface, deeper than that. Unstable. I tried to inhale fully and couldn't. That scared me more than anything else. This wasn't the first time. At the beginning, there were apologies, long explanations, promises that sounded convincing because I wanted them to be. Over time, the apologies disappeared. Silence replaced them, and silence meant this was no longer temporary. By morning, the pain hadn't faded. It had spread. When I tried to sit up, dizziness rushed over me so fast I had to grab the bed to keep from blacking out. My chest felt tight, like something inside was restricting every breath. I looked at him sleeping beside me, peaceful, certain, untouched. And for the first time, staying didn't feel emotionally unbearable. It felt physically dangerous. I was afraid that if I stayed, I might not wake up. Leaving was slow and painful. My legs shook as I stood. I moved carefully, using furniture for support. Getting dressed hurt. Lifting my arms sent sharp warnings through my side, so I chose the loosest clothes I could find. When my phone screen lit up, I froze. One eye was swollen. A dark bruise stretched across my cheekbone, deeper than any before. I didn't look for long. I didn't want doubt. I grabbed my keys and moved toward the door. The floor creaked. My heart slammed. I froze, matching my breath to his. From the bedroom, he was still sleeping. Nothing had changed. Outside, cold air hit my face, and I had to grip the doorframe to stay upright. My vision narrowed. For a moment, I hesitated. Then a sharp pain cut through my chest, stealing my breath completely. That decided it. Driving was terrifying. My hands shook on the wheel. Red lights stretched endlessly. Halfway there, my vision blurred and I had to pull over, pressing my forehead to the wheel until it passed. By the time I reached the hospital, I could barely stand. I stumbled inside, trying to explain that something was wrong. The nurse looked at my face, then at the way I was holding my side. Her expression changed. More people, faster voices, a stretcher. As they lifted me, the ceiling lights blurred into white lines, and fear finally caught up with me. Not fear of him, but fear of what would happen once questions started. Because I could already hear sirens. And I knew once authority stepped in, nothing would stay simple. I thought collapsing at the hospital meant I was finally out of his reach. But I didn't realize the evidence my body carried would make everything far more complicated. I woke up struggling to breathe. Not panicked breathing, careful breathing. Controlled. Like my body was afraid that if it went too deep, something inside my chest would fail. There was a tight pressure wrapped around my ribs, unfamiliar and wrong, as if my lungs had forgotten how much space they were allowed. The ceiling above me was white, too white. The lights hummed softly, steady and impersonal. A machine beeped beside me. When I tried to move my arm, it resisted. Tubes, wires, a plastic band tight around my wrist. I shifted slightly and pain flared through my side, sharp enough to steal the sound from my throat. A nurse appeared immediately. "Don't move," she said gently. "You're in the emergency department. You're stable." Stable. The word didn't comfort me. It felt temporary. A doctor followed her in, already reading from a tablet. He asked routine questions, name, age, allergies, in a calm, practiced tone, like he was assembling a puzzle he'd completed many times before. Then he looked up. "Do you remember how you were injured?" The question landed heavier than it should have. I hesitated. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I suddenly understood there was a correct version and a dangerous one. "I felt dizzy," I said carefully. "I couldn't breathe properly." He nodded once and made a note. "We're running imaging. Your oxygen levels dropped earlier." Earlier meant when I collapsed. A second nurse entered and lifted my gown slightly to attach another monitor. I felt her pause, not shock, but recognition. She adjusted the sheet and leaned in just enough to lower her voice. "Try to stay awake," she said. "We'll be back." When they left, I noticed something new. A security guard stood near the doorway. Not inside the room, just close enough to see in. That's when relief drained out of me. I told myself it was protocol, that I was reading too much into it. Then my phone buzzed. Once, I ignored it. It buzzed again. Unknown number. My stomach tightened. I didn't need to read it to know who it was. He would have noticed by now the empty bed, the silence, my car gone. A doctor returned with results. "You have fractures," he said calmly. "Not severe enough for surgery, but significant. You're fortunate you came in when you did." "If you'd waited longer," he added, then stopped. "If I'd stayed home," I thought. "That wouldn't have been wise," he said. Then more quietly, "Did someone hurt you?" Before I could answer, movement in the hallway caught my attention. A familiar shape passed the glass near the nurse's station. Broad shoulders, confident stride, my heart dropped. He was already here. "I don't want trouble," I said. "This isn't about trouble," the doctor replied. "It's about documentation." Footsteps approached. 2 police officers entered the room, controlled, observant. The female officer spoke first. "We just need to ask you a few questions." The male officer stayed near the doorway, blocking it without a word. "Where were you injured?" she asked. Before I could answer, a voice came from behind them. "There you are." His voice, concerned, polished, perfect. "She left without saying anything," he said. "I was worried. She's been under a lot of stress lately. I think she panicked." The officers turned toward him. That's when I realized he hadn't been called. He had come on his own, prepared. And as they listened to him, nodding slowly, I understood the real danger had just begun. Because this wasn't about what happened in my kitchen anymore. It was about whose version would survive the room. I thought the hospital would force the truth into the open. But watching the officers nod as he spoke, I realized he might already be shaping what the truth would become. They separated us quietly. No urgency. No drama. One officer stayed with me. The other stepped into the hallway with him. The curtain between us stayed half-drawn, thin enough for me to hear voices without understanding words. That felt intentional. The officer across from me opened her notebook. Her expression was neutral, not unkind, not supportive. "We just need to clarify a few things," she said. Clarify meant test. She asked where I'd been earlier that night, how long we'd been married. Then the questions shifted. Had I been under a lot of stress lately? Was I sleeping well? Had I ever fainted before? I felt the story tilting not toward what happened, but toward who I was. I answered carefully. I didn't accuse him again. I didn't defend myself either. I stuck to facts. But facts didn't feel solid anymore. They felt negotiable. From the hallway, I heard his voice rise slightly. Not angry, concerned. He laughed once, softly, like he was embarrassed on my behalf. The officer wrote something down. "Your husband mentioned you've been overwhelmed recently," she said. That part was true. Stress was the easiest version of me to believe. "And tonight," she continued, "you don't remember exactly how you were injured." "I remember," I said. "I just don't know how to explain it safely." She looked up. "Safely how?" I didn't answer, because the honest answer wasn't about him anymore. It was about what happens when women speak and aren't believed. The doctor returned with discharge paperwork. His tone was calm, but tighter now. "You'll need rest," he said. "Avoid stress." Avoid stress. The nurse who had paused earlier came back to check my IV. She leaned in slightly and lowered her voice. "Be careful what you say," she murmured. "Once something goes into the report, it stays there." "What goes in?" I asked. She met my eyes, both versions. The officers returned together. "We're documenting this as an incident pending review," the female officer said. "No charges at this time." No charges. The words landed heavy and hollow. He stepped back into the room then, perfectly timed. Thank the officers. Thank the doctor, didn't look at me. "I'll take her home," he said easily. "I'm not going home," I said, silence. "She's upset," he added gently. "I'll make sure she's safe." "I have somewhere else to go," I said. "A friend." The officers exchanged a glance. "That's probably best for tonight," the woman said. "Probably." As they left, he leaned in close, his voice low and controlled. "You didn't need to do this," he said. "Now things are complicated." He straightened, smiled for the staff, and walked out. I stared down at the paperwork on my lap, and I understood something clearly for the first time. If I didn't take control of the story soon, the story would define me. And this fight wouldn't be loud. It would be written. I thought leaving the hospital meant leaving him behind, but as I held the papers in my hands, I realized the real battle was just beginning, and it would be fought on record, not memory. The first thing I did was stop explaining myself. Explanation had become a trap. Every sentence invited interpretation. Every emotion got reframed. I realized belief wasn't something you asked for, it was something you forced with structure. So I went quiet, not weak quiet, organized quiet. I didn't block him. I didn't confront him. I let his messages come in and I saved everyone. I stopped responding quickly. Then I stopped responding at all. Silence made him careless. While he assumed I was exhausted and unsure, I started collecting. Hospital records, imaging timestamps, discharge notes, the nurse's name, the doctor's name, the exact time the police arrived, the exact words used, incident pending review, language matters. I wrote everything down while it was still sharp. I contacted a legal advocate through a support organization, not a dramatic rescue, just a calm woman who spoke in steps instead of comfort. "This doesn't move fast," she told me. "That works in your favor if you're patient." Patient? I could do that. She explained something that changed how I saw everything. Cases like mine don't collapse because there's no truth. They collapse because truth arrives disorganized, emotion-heavy, easy to dismiss, so we didn't rush. I opened a separate bank account, changed passwords, turned off location sharing I hadn't realized was on. I gave one trusted friend copies of everything, not to help, but to witness. If something happened to me, the story wouldn't vanish with me. He tried again. Messages shifted from concern to irritation, then to accusation. He warned me not to make things worse. He reminded me how complicated life could become. I saved it all. At work, I told HR one sentence only. "I'm dealing with a legal matter. Documentation exists." That was enough to stop him from rewriting me there. Every move I made was small, boring, invisible. That's what made it effective. Weeks passed. He relaxed. I could feel it. The pressure in his messages faded. He assumed I'd folded back into silence, the old kind. He didn't know I was building something solid underneath. Paper doesn't react. Paper doesn't panic. Paper doesn't forget. When my lawyer finally said, "We're ready," it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like control. Because for the first time since I left the house that night, I wasn't trying to survive what he might do next. I was deciding when the system would see him clearly. He thought my silence meant surrender, but what he didn't realize was that every quiet day was tightening the record, and soon it would close around him. The day it happened didn't feel dramatic. There was no confrontation, no shouting, no moment where the room held its breath. That's how I knew it was real. My lawyer called in the afternoon. Her voice was calm, almost casual. "The order has been granted," she said. "Effective immediately." I sat down slowly, not because I was overwhelmed, but because my body finally understood it could stop bracing. The protective order wasn't loud. It didn't accuse. It didn't explain. It simply existed, a line drawn by the system itself. He was served that evening. I didn't watch. I didn't need to. What mattered wasn't his reaction, it was what followed. His messages stopped. Not gradually, completely. Silence, when it comes from someone like him, isn't peace. It's shock. It's the moment they realize the usual levers don't move anything anymore. A few days later, the second step activated. Financial restrictions. Temporary, procedural, undeniable. Accounts reviewed. Transactions flagged, not punishment containment. He tried to challenge it. Paper met paper. His version ran into timestamps, into medical notes, into records that didn't argue back. The workplace followed shortly after. Not because I demanded anything, but because documentation exists has weight. HR doesn't respond to emotion. It responds to liability. I didn't celebrate, I waited. Weeks passed. The court date arrived quietly. No audience, no drama, just questions and answers measured against records. When the judge spoke, there was no condemnation in his voice, just clarity. The order would remain. Contact prohibited. Terms defined. Boundaries formalized. When it was over, I walked outside and stood there longer than necessary. The world hadn't changed, but my position in it had. I thought revenge would feel sharp, vindicating, loud. It didn't. It felt like oxygen. Like being able to move without calculating risk. Like checking my phone without flinching. Like silence that didn't mean danger. He never apologized. That was never the point. What mattered was this: I no longer existed inside his version. The record did, and records don't forget. They don't negotiate. They don't get tired. They just stand. I went home that night, not to the house I left, but to a place that belonged entirely to me. I locked the door, not because I was afraid, but because I could. And for the first time in a very long time, the quiet felt honest. I didn't destroy him. I didn't need to. I just let the truth finish what silence started.